It started with the sound. At first, I thought it was just the wind scraping against the side of the house, a dry, high-pitched whine that came in short bursts and then faded. I live alone, on the outskirts of a small town in northern Maine, and wind has always been a constant companion out here. But this wasn't the wind. It was sharper, more deliberate, almost rhythmic. It was a Thursday night in late October. I'd just come back from a long day working on the dock. The air was brittle with cold, the kind that stings your face when you walk through it. I remember making myself a mug of coffee and settling into my chair by the fire, thinking about nothing more than getting warm. But that sound, that faint, scratching wail, kept pulling my mind away from the comfort of the flames. It was coming from outside. No, not outside. From the direction of the old barn. Now, the barn hasn't been used in over a decade. My father built it in the 70s, and when he passed, I just never had much reason to go in there. It's half collapsed on one side, filled with rotting boards, old tools, and the smell of mold. But something about the sound made me get up, grab my coat, and step out into the night. The cold hit me like a punch. I could see my breath in thick clouds, illuminated by the light from the kitchen window. The rest of the yard was swallowed in shadow. The barn sat about 40 yards away, hunched and sagging like it was tired of standing. The moon was bright enough to cast a silver outline around its frame. I heard it again. Scratch, pause, scratch, scratch. It was definitely coming from inside. My boots crunched in the frost as I walked toward it. Halfway there, I realized something strange. The sound stopped when I moved. Completely silent. I stood still, waited. After about 10 seconds, the scratching started again. This time, faster, more frantic. I can't explain why, but my chest tightened. It felt wrong in a way I couldn't put into words, like the air around me was heavier. I pulled out the flashlight I keep in my coat pocket and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on the barn doors. One was hanging off its hinge, the other barely holding on. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first: damp wood, old hay, and something faintly metallic. The beam of my flashlight swept over piles of junk, broken ladders, rusted tools, a half-collapsed workbench. The sound had stopped again. I took another step, and then it whispered. I don't mean the wind or the creak of old boards. I mean an actual whisper, a voice, low and breathy, curling around the inside of my skull like smoke. It said my name. I froze. My hand tightened around the flashlight until my knuckles ached. I turned in a slow circle, the beam cutting across the walls. No one, nothing. Just the faint, slow drip of water from somewhere in the corner. The whisper came again, closer this time. I swung the flashlight toward the sound and caught a glimpse of movement. Something pale slipping between the shadows at the far end of the barn. My pulse hammered in my ears. I called out, my voice cracking. "Who's there?" No answer, but I heard breathing. Against my better judgment, I moved toward the back wall. There's an old storage room built into the barn, a place my father used to keep feed sacks. The door was shut. The breathing was coming from inside. I reached out and put my hand on the doorknob. It was ice cold. And then, just before I turned it, the breathing stopped. Silence. I stood there for a good 20 seconds, my mind screaming at me to go back to the house. But curiosity, or maybe stupidity, won. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. Nothing. The room was empty, except for a pile of shredded burlap in the corner. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I was swallowed in pitch black, and then, right by my ear, a voice whispered again. Only this time, it wasn't my name. It said, "It's not your barn." I bolted. I don't even remember crossing the yard, just the slam of my boots against the porch and the sound of my own breath tearing through the cold air. I locked the door behind me and stood there in the kitchen, my hands shaking so badly I spilled coffee on the floor. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel someone standing over me. The barn sat in the distance, dark and silent, but I knew with every bone in my body that something was in there. And it knew me. The next day, I decided I was going to burn the barn down. But when I went outside, the barn doors were open, wide open, and there were footprints in the frost leading from the barn straight to my back door. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old house sounded like a footstep. Every shadow seemed to breathe. The wind pressed against the walls like it was trying to force its way in, and I could almost hear voices carried on its back whispering my name, stretching the syllables in ways no living person could. When morning came, I thought maybe daylight would loosen the knot in my chest, but it didn't. It just exposed things I didn't notice in the dark, muddy footprints on the hallway floor, even though I'd locked every door before bed. They led from the back entrance toward the living room, then vanished, like whoever, or whatever, left them had dissolved into the air. I grabbed my phone and called Henry, the one friend I had who wouldn't laugh at this kind of thing. He didn't answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. By the third attempt, my hands were shaking. Henry lived only a few miles away. I decided to go over and see him. Driving through the town felt strange. It wasn't just quiet, it was wrong. The people I did see moved like their minds were somewhere else, walking too slowly, faces blank, eyes fixed ahead like they were following something only they could see. One man stood at a street corner, just staring up at the sky, mouth hanging open. He didn't blink, not once, even when my car passed right in front of him. Henry's house was locked, blinds drawn. I banged on the door, shouting his name. No answer. I was about to leave when I caught a glimpse of movement inside, just a flicker, like someone darting past the window. I pounded harder, and that's when I heard it. The slow scrape of footsteps inside, moving toward the door. It opened an inch, then a little more, and there was Henry. Only it wasn't him. His skin was pale like wax, his eyes too wide, too fixed, like the people in town. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask why I was there. He just whispered, "You shouldn't have stayed in that house last night." Before I could ask what he meant, he slammed the door shut so hard the frame rattled. I drove home fast, heart hammering, every nerve screaming that I'd stepped into something I couldn't understand. When I got there, I saw something waiting on my front porch, an envelope. No name, no stamp. Inside was a single piece of paper with words written in jagged black ink. Leave before the third night. That night, the dreams started again. Only this time, they didn't feel like dreams. I was in my bed, but I couldn't move. The room was cold enough to frost my breath, and in the corner, I could see something shifting, long fingers curling around the wall, a shape leaning forward until two pinpoints of light burned where its eyes should be. It whispered my name, slow and patient, like it was tasting it, and I swear I could feel it smiling. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding so violently it hurt. My first thought was that it had only been a dream, but then I saw it, my breath still clouding in the cold air. Something had been here. By now, I was desperate to understand what was happening. I searched the attic, the basement, even behind the walls where the plaster had cracked. That's when I found it, a trap door in the floor of the storage room, hidden beneath an old rug. It was smaller than any normal entrance, like it was meant to keep something in, not give people a way out. When I opened it, a wave of stale, bitter air rolled over me. I shone a flashlight down, and my stomach clenched. The space below wasn't a basement. It was a tunnel. I climbed down the wooden ladder, the rungs soft with rot. The tunnel walls were covered in strange symbols, gouged into the dirt, deep enough to look fresh. They weren't in any language I recognized, but somehow I felt them, like the shapes themselves were pressing into my skull. At the end of the tunnel, I found a small chamber lit by a single candle, wax hardened in long, twisted rivers. In the center was a wooden box, carved with the same symbols. The moment I stepped closer, I heard breathing. Not my own. Slow, deliberate, coming from everywhere at once. Then the candle flickered and went out. I froze. the darkness pressing against my skin. Something moved past me fast enough that the air rushed by my ear, slow enough that I felt the brush of a hand against my arm. And then, a whisper. "You're already one of us." The flashlight sputtered back to life in my shaking hands, but the chamber was empty. The box was gone. I scrambled out of the tunnel, slamming the trapdoor shut behind me, but it didn't matter. The house felt different now, like it was awake. That night, I didn't bother trying to sleep. I just sat in the living room, staring at the door, waiting for whatever was coming. And when the clock struck 3 in the morning, the doorknob began to turn. Not rattle, not jiggle, turn. I should have run, but my body wouldn't move. The door swung open, and there they were, dozens of figures, their faces pale and wrong like Henry's, eyes shining faintly in the dark. And in the center, taller than the rest, was the thing from my dreams. It stepped inside, and the others followed, surrounding me in silence. The tall one leaned down, its face inches from mine. And in that moment, I understood there had never been a way to escape. The letter, the warning, the dreams, they weren't trying to scare me away. They were letting me know I'd already crossed the line. When the third night ended, I wasn't me anymore. And now, I'm standing in your doorway,